Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on innovative solutions to achieve sustainable mobility in urban areas. I'm your moderator for this session, Yannick Bousse from the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, otherwise known as CINEA. I'm here with my co-moderator for today, Andréia Lopes Azevedo, from POLIS, which is Cities and Regions for Transport Innovation. And in this session today, we'll be discussing innovative solutions and products to achieve sustainable urban mobility. Many of our European cities are already really global frontrunners when it comes to transport innovations. Our cities are often the best living laboratories where new solutions to common challenges are designed, tested, and implemented. This contributes not only to effective and sustainable urban mobility, but also to further increase the quality of life in Europe, in European cities, and for the people who live there. Together with these three recently completed projects, many other EU research and innovation initiatives have exploitable results and products that have great potential to accelerate innovation towards the EU mission to achieve 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030. To discuss these topics, we have three projects with us here today. Our speakers from CityChangerCargoBike, Handshake, and Park4SUMP. We'll go on to the first project then, so that is with CityChangerCargoBike. And we have with us here Samuel Pierce. Sam is a project manager at Cycling Industries Europe, the European Trade Association for the bicycle industry. In his role, he managed the projects of CityChangerCargoBike and also bicycles and ITS. And he also leads the association's work on cargo bikes and ITS. Samuel has extensive experience in transport and mobility, with previous roles focusing on smart cities, connected mobility, and road safety. Sam, over to you. Each speaker has 15 minutes. We have here a timer, by the way, which is set for you. So here you go.
Thank you, Yannick. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for the introduction, Yannick. I think that gives a very clear picture of who I am and what I'm going to be presenting today. One, key point that I just want to bring up even on this opening slide is just the name of this presentation, which is From Niche to Mainstream, the Impact of CCCB. The CCCB project ran for 3 years, actually a bit longer due to COVID. It had an extension, but in that time we saw basically an exponential growth in cargo bikes and the use of cargo bikes for personal transport and commuting and personal activities, to also more and more use of cargo bikes and carrier cycles for logistics and deliveries and services. So it's been a pretty amazing experience for this project. I mean, obviously this project's contributed to that. It's also been a very organic growth of an industry that's really just come of its time. It's, cargo bikes have been around for about 10, 15 years, going back to Copenhagen, where they were sort of developed, and the Netherlands a little bit, but it's really in the past sort of 5 years that they've just, as I said, grown exponentially. The CCCB project brought together the partners and partner cities and organizations that you can see on the screen here. So it was a very trans-European project, and yeah, I think that's been also very important for the project because obviously cycling, the adoption of cycling, cargo bikes, the use of cargo bikes depends on cultures, and in a city like Copenhagen, yeah, there's a culture there already that's very accepting of that, but going to other parts of Europe, that's definitely not the case. So it's been really important for the project to bring together that very diverse set of cities and partners to see how applicable cargo bikes can be in personal and private use cases. These are just obviously some of the key benefits and where we saw the potential of more cargo bike, the sort of rollout of more and more cargo bikes. Obviously, in replacing diesel vans for transport, and the reduction of emissions that can bring about. Active cargo bikes are obviously a form of active mobility, and makes people healthier and improves the functioning of cities. There's also improvements there on road safety and general livability of cities through less vehicle use. And then one of the key things of the project, one of the key sort of statistics of the project was this ability to shift 51% of trips, transport and logistics trips in urban areas to cargo bikes. So throughout the life of the project, we were able to put together 150 awareness-raising workshops and webinars. I'll just go through some brief statistics here because obviously the project is finished now. It finished in July of last year, so we have a number of results that I'll just run through with you now briefly. But we had a number of 650 cargo bikes that got brought into use for municipalities in 15 of the partner cities. And a strong part of the project has been sort of encouraging buy-in from mayors, and we've produced communications and campaigns around that throughout the project. So we've been able to inspire 37 mayors from around Europe as well, which I think is an important part of getting the supporting infrastructure and ecosystem in place for further cargo bike use. Again, cargo bike infrastructure has been a key point because these are obviously big, heavy bikes that can't sort of just be stashed away in someone's courtyard or in the entrance of a building or something. You need proper infrastructure for these bikes. So in a number of partner cities, they've been able to do this. Even a part of the project, what you see at the bottom there, in Strasbourg, there's been a specific cargo bike stand that was developed by the city, cargo bike stand to lock cargo bikes against. So that's also because, again, the general sort of bike parking infrastructure doesn't quite accommodate a lot of cargo bikes. So this is also, I think, a unique element of the project that has longer term potential. A number of tryouts were held throughout the project, and that was just basically familiarizing people with cargo bikes. They're still relatively new for a lot of people, so yeah, these were sort of just locally organized events, quite fun, getting people familiar and getting them using a cargo bike in a closed space so that they can, as I said, become familiar with them, and it's not such a strange foreign object that they just see other people using. And a sort of social media communications campaign that we also did within the project was the Local Heroes Project. So basically getting people to be advocates for cargo bike usage, and doing this on social media through tags and sort of just general awareness raising. But some of the other areas where the project has had an impact is through the partner cities putting in access restrictions, which more and more cities are doing for cars and for urban deliveries, and that's obviously is a unique selling point of cargo bikes, where they can actually enter into these areas and carry out that work still. And then another part of the project was getting the procurement procedures of local municipalities to sort of favour cargo bikes for their local services. So whether that's maintaining of public space or rubbish collection, things like that, cargo bikes were sort of in some use cases the preferred means of vehicle for that sort of use. And then for those, buying a cargo bike is obviously quite an expensive activity, and you know, not a lot of people have this fun or see the, you know, interest in sort of putting in that much money into a cargo bike, at least from the beginning. So a sort of nice stopgap, you know, to sort of give people the experience and see how it can be used, or for people who just don't, you know, want to have for people who want to have a cargo bike just to sort of do a shopping run to the garden centre or to IKEA or something to pick up something bulky, the hardware store. You know, a shed cargo bike can be a really good solution for that. And so, yeah, the project worked with a number of commercial partners to sort of implement cargo bike sharing rental schemes in cities throughout the project. And then similarly, this was a sort of more of a community-led initiative through the Commons Cargo Bikes initiative. And again, very much the same thing. Community organisations having a cargo bike to share amongst the users within that community, local community, and that's also another way to sort of have access to a cargo bike when you need it, but not have it all the time. On the logistics side of things, we were able to work with a number of logistics operators, ranging from, you know, small psychologistics companies to some of the bigger operators that you see here on screen. Obviously there are challenges in doing that, but yeah, we were able to do that in a number of pilot projects throughout the project. And then, as I mentioned before, you know, purchasing a cargo bike at retail price is quite an expensive proposition. But more and more well, definitely cities within the project, but more and more cities more broadly are subsidising the purchase of electric bikes and cargo bikes. And so that was also part of the project to sort of push that incentivisation scheme more and more, and sort of be able to see the results. You know, when you offer that subsidy scheme to a population, what's the result of that? And we saw a lot of uptake from cities, from individuals, often to the point where, you know, the subsidy schemes were basically the money went almost straight away, and there was, yeah, really no more money on the government side to sort of continue those schemes. Hopefully in the future that will continue, but as a pilot, it proved how successful and how much demand there is for cargo bikes. And then a tool that we were able to put together with the European Cyclist Federation, one of the partners of the project, was basically a tracker for all the subsidy schemes that are in place throughout Europe for the different types of bikes, cargo bikes, e-bikes, normal bikes, incentives and subsidies for commercial specific usage as well. So that was, I think that's quite a valuable resource to anyone interested in having a broader European perspective of how purchase premiums, you know, what's in place currently throughout Europe. And as I mentioned before, you know, a part of the project was sort of incentivising mayors and decision makers, but and you can see down the bottom here we had a specific guidebook or brochure that was for specifically targeted at mayors, but you know, we aim to target a lot of other audiences, whether that was retailers, families looking to transport children, city planning, planning for cycle logistics in cities, and then sort of just urban infrastructure development through the cargo bike friendly city guide that was put together as well. And then a very interesting part of what I sort of mentioned earlier on was the uptake of cargo bikes throughout the life of the project, and we were able to put together a number of surveys, 3 surveys over the life of the project, to measure how that uptake sort of was tracking. And it's been really valuable for us as the Cycling Industry Association in any case, and I think for the project more broadly, to see how that has developed. Basically, in the final survey that was conducted, we looked to cover 2 different areas of the cargo bike market. That was the manufacturers, and then on the operator side as well. So on the manufacturer side of things, the survey respondents essentially indicated that they would be selling almost 100,000 cargo bikes in 2022. Our projections were that, you know, looking at the survey sample size, which was 20% of the cargo bike market, we were able to sort of project that that would be sort of 400,000 to 500,000 cargo bikes throughout Europe. And a really interesting indicator, I think, for how the sector has scaled over the past 3 years was that when we conducted this, the first survey in 2020, there was only one company that reported selling 5,000 cargo bikes in the year, and now there were 6. So that's six-fold growth. It's huge, and I think it's really indicative of basically what I think we all see in our cities every day, more and more cargo bikes. I know I see it here in Brussels. Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. On the operator side of things, so this, you know, covers psychologistics operators. This covers tradespeople using cargo bikes, or small and medium-sized enterprises using cargo bikes for their deliveries as well. We saw that the respondents were generating 400 million euros in revenue, employing 28,000 people, and our calculations were that that would save about 50,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. And then projecting across Europe and beyond the sample size that we were working with, we saw this generating 2.5 billion euros in revenue, employing 170,000 people and saving 302,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. Again, these are some more statistics, but talking about, you know, the prevalence of how much cargo bikes are used in delivery work, because that is really where they do generate the greatest benefits compared to, especially in urban environments, compared to vans. A Guardian article that was citing some UK research recently was putting cargo bikes as being 6 times more efficient than vans in urban areas, and speaking with some of our members who do psychologistics in cities like London and Brussels, that sort of statistic holds, which is really interesting to see. And I think also another interesting area was the sort of growing workforce, where because psychologistic services are growing, the number of locally employed people are growing, and that number has tripled since 2019 compared to our first survey. And a quarter of that workforce is women. So, and that's also something that we've seen in the usage of cargo bikes. It is often, you know, a 50-50 men and women usage of cargo bikes, and it's just a very universal way of getting people cycling, because it allows you to do so many things: transport children, run errands, do the shopping, you know, all the things that you would do in a car, all the things that you would use a 1.5 ton vehicle for, you can do with a 20 kilo bike, which I think is quite special. And sort of where we go from here, I mean, the project has ended. One of the legacies of the project, and something that we're looking at doing as a trade association, is putting together rider training, because it's a part of the sector that's not adequately covered, and having a scheme in place, or having a standard in place for riders, I think is going to be, as more and more of the bigger operators are going to start using cargo bikes, there's going to be a need for standards in place for safe riding, because there is public liability issues at play there, and personal liability issues. So that's, I think, going to be a key area that will need to be looked at going into the future. And we've already held a workshop on this last year at the Eurobike convention, which is sort of like the big cycling convention of the year. But I'm out of time, and that is also my last slide. And yeah, I'm happy to speak with anyone following the rest of the presentations, or if you have any questions, be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. I particularly note those impressive growth figures for the cargo bike industry. It's very interesting to hear about, and also good to see in terms of, as the project is closing now, the continuation in this rider training scheme is very interesting. So thanks a lot. We go on now to our next speaker. So this is Pascal van den Noort. Pascal is Executive Director of Vélo Mondial and a partner within the Civitas Handshake project. Pascal has over 20 years experience within EU cycling projects and describes himself as a conceptual thinker, a skilled moderator, a mobility expert, and your best option for learning about cycling and Amsterdam. Today, Pascal is filling in for Mario Gualdi from Isinova, who is the coordinator of Civitas Handshake, but unfortunately was not able to be with us here today. Pascal, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to keep the time. I will look every now and then to my left side, but for Yannick, I have a little bit of a free-flowing presentation in mind. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and it's all about cycling stepping out of the shadows. Cycling becoming an extremely important tool, especially in the field of climate change. If cities really want to become climate neutral, then they will have to have a solid plan for cycling. If they don't, they can forget about it. So I'm invited here to talk about Civitas Handshake, but before I do so, and I promise you I will rush through the slides later on, I would like to go back in time when I was asked in 1999 to organize the second global cycling conference in Amsterdam, because it, as the headhunter said, the present organizers, they talk a lot, but they don't do shit. And they needed a vicious manager. So I told him, well, let me help you, find one. I said, no, we mean you, of course. Well, I never knew that I was a vicious manager, but now I can promise you I am one, really vicious. I organized that conference and I said to people, when they complimented me, I said this was the best conference ever. I said, shall we do something together then? And they said, nah, we wait till the next conference. So that is the atmosphere of cycling around 2000. A little bit vague people, really enthusiastic, really on the ball as far as talking concerned, but not so much as getting dressed a little bit properly or talking in terms of policy. No, the bicycle was the hero of the day. And I said to myself, well, if they don't want to do something, then my field is clear and I can go do my own business. I'm an old-fashioned economist. I can calculate, I can plan, and I can talk. And so I had two definitions for myself, two principles. The first one was to do exactly the opposite as people were doing up to then. So I said, I am going to make cycling glamorous all over the world, because that's not what they did. But in order to stay out of their hands, I said, I know nothing about cycling, and I intend to keep it that way. If you have developed the width of the white line, come and bring it to me, and I'll take it up, take it on board. I had a career of 10 years behind me in the biggest pandemic in the world, the AIDS pandemic. I set up the Dutch AIDS Foundation. I set up a global association of people living with HIV and AIDS. And that was my teaching to be bold enough to say I'm going to make cycling glamorous all over the world. So where do you go if you want to do that? You go to the European Commission, of course. 2001. Cycling, that is what Europe should do, I said to the man somewhere here in Brussels in a vague building. Nah, he said, nah. I said, what do you mean, nah? Then he spoke the words that I never understood. There is no body of work. I said, my English is pretty good, but I don't know what you said. There is no body of work. He says there's not one document on cycling on the shelves of the European Commission. We speak 2001. Can you imagine? 22 years ago, there was nothing on cycling. We're still not far enough, because we are now the last session in this conference. I think that should change next time. Go to day 1, for instance, maybe day 2, and the next year, day 1. But it needs to be better appreciated, the power that cycling has. The story of Samuel just now proves that, like cargo transport doesn't need these big bulk things. It can go on bicycle. I made a new energy entity called the kilokilometer. Yes, I will get to my speech later on. That's going to come. This is the kilokilometer, which is the every kilo that you transport for 1 kilometer, you spend 1 kilokilometer, 1 km. So if you have a big car of 2,000 kilo to buy 1 package of sugar, you basically spend, if you do that 3 kilometers, be good. But in a car of 2,000 kilos, then you spend 6,000 to go and 6,001 to come back, because you have that kilo of sugar extra. If you do that on your bicycle, then you spend 20 kilokilometers. Now, so far so good, but if the governments will ration the number of kilokilometers that you can use, then people will know what it is to use that car all the time and go on back. Well, I'm digressing. I was in 2001. I did that study in cycling in Europe, and the rest is history. This Civitas Handshake is the last project in the series, and it is at the same time the most gorgeous project that exists. It is fantastic. The good thing is that we put the civil servants who do cycling planning central in the project. They were the key, the platform. They were what it was all about. Because if they don't do anything, nothing happens. They were a little bit shy. Civil servants for cycling are very modest, the most wonderful people, but extremely shy. And we trained them to be a little bit more bold. And we asked them to talk together in an atmosphere that is confident. And they learned, and they now do not want to get rid of the project. The project cannot end. So my last part of my speech will be on the international cycling community of practice, a way to bring civil servants on cycling together in a private space where they can communicate, where they can talk, where they can learn from each other, and where we can give them also all kinds of information. Having said that as an introduction, I go to Handshake. And, oh, there's a whole lot of stuff. You know, I have colleagues who can do this. They do this. These are the cities. What we did was we have Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Munich as cycling capitals. They have a lot experience, and they wanted to share that with the 10 other cities that you see on this map. And we had a few ways of supporting them. Isinova from Italy, from Rome, magnificent organization. I'm really so impressed what they do. Keep an eye on them. ICLE, of course, you all know, stunning good. Mobile 21 will present itself later on as well. And Decisio, our great inventor of bikeonomics. It's an economics firm who have invented the tool of bikeonomics, stemming from a series of dinner parties in my house, where we said, how can we make cycling more glamorous? So the dinner parties were good because I cooked, but also bikeonomics was one of the results. What we did, so these on the left side are the cities, in the middle is the processes, and I'll talk a little bit about it because the assessment and evaluation, the best thing that I learned, especially from Henrik from Copenhagen, he says, normally when you do assessment and evaluation, you do that at the end of the project because you have to tick that box that you have evaluated the thing. But in Handshake, he found out that we are permanently evaluating, permanently going to the colleagues and asking, how do you do this? How have we done this? And how can we improve? Evaluation is a permanent tool, not as an end tool, like that you have to tick the box, but as a tool. Then transition management is how do you get the stuff that you're convinced that should happen to the people of the city, to people of the municipality. How do you bring that about? And then the most fun and creative part were the immersive events. We learned that you should not go on a study tour of like a day and a half. When you arrive, and you settle in, you go talk a little bit and cycle a bit, and you have dinner in the evening, and the next morning you have a review, and then you go home. That's nothing, and you learn nothing. We invited them to come for a week, a whole week, in which we said, you go to see a lot, talk a lot, and relax a lot, but then you can let it sink in. I have 5 minutes and 8 seconds, so I'm good on track, but I have to rush this now. There were 60 solutions studied in a number of regions: planning, modeling, infrastructure, and awareness. And that is what's permanently in the project. We did 4 years. It was quite a long time. In those, so I had a slide for that. So 4 areas where the 60 solutions were studied. This is technical results. I have no clue what it is. It is plus 34% cycling use, double cycling car passenger kilometer ratio. I'm an economist, but not a statistician. I made the case for cycling investment by economics. That is what I do understand. That was really fantastic. For €4 gained in every €1 spent. Maybe later on I can come to the law of Pascal. It's a nice law, and talk about that later on. We made Handshake TV. I made 172 videos with my 360-degree camera that is accessible to everybody. We have online portals. We have a whole lot of booklets. And we have, I don't know how this works. Okay. And even more booklets. So go to the website, handshakecycling.eu, and you'll find all the results of Handshake. Now, in the last 3 minutes and 36 seconds, I'm going to talk about the international cycling community of practice. What we learned is that if you keep civil servants on cycling together and make them feel good about each other, then they make an international institutional memory. Most cities are losing their institutional memory. They have people who come in and go out together, take all the knowledge with them, all the experience, and so they lose quality. But if you take bits and pieces of everybody of that knowledge that they have, you put it in one pot, and you allow them to all use it, then you create an institutional memory that is there to stay. Now, before we allow cities to enter this tool, they need to do a self-assessment. We said cycling has like 20 elements. Cycling policy has like 20 elements. And we asked them, where are you on each of those 20 elements? And it's a multiple choice questionnaire. It goes from we do nothing to we are the best on 20 issues. And then in the end, we calculate and we give them copper, bronze, silver, gold, or platinum. That is not to compare to other cities. It's to compare to themselves and to find ambition to improve one of the 20 elements. That they can do in the private space, that they can only access if they have done the first part. There is a whole lot of content sharing to do on the 20 elements of cycling planning. Very focused documents. And the last part is why I am here, and I have 1 minute and 40 seconds to do that. Support. We need you, because the European Commission granted us wonderful contracts, but as soon as that contract ends, then there is no space for exploitation. And the international cycling community of practice is something I know, I hear it everywhere, is what people want. They want it to happen. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, what can the industry mean for the international cycling community of practice and for all the others? It gave us a beautiful document. It is, you can all benefit from us doing this international cycling community of practice. This is the team. It is Mario Gualdi from Rome, stunning man. Lucas Harms, the genius who does the Dutch Cycling Embassy. Meredith Glazer, who is a science person. myself, of course, and Antonio Di Bacco, who is more PR related. And I have 35 seconds left, so it's gone. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pascal. I particularly note the effort for this continuation of this project in the community of practice. So for those who are interested, there was an email address there, info@velo.info. And if you're interested to get involved with this, then you can contact Pascal or just come and talk to us here at the end of the session. And I particularly also wanted to mention that just recently there was also a publication made on the Horizon Europe Results platform. Also, if you're interested in getting involved with the community of practice, you can find more information there about the results of this project. So next we go on to our following speaker, which is Patrick Auwerks. Patrick is the senior project leader at Mobile 21, which is an internationally well-known NGO based in Belgium. The core business of Mobile 21 is sustainable mobility, and that's already been for almost 40 years now. Patrick is also the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 Park4SUMP project. The project completed itself last year in the 31st of August, and to hear more about that, here is Patrick with us.
Thank you, Yannick. So I will be talking about another approach on parking, preparing the city for the future of parking instead. And I would like to start with mentioning the elephant in the urban mobility room, as we say. This is about the car predominancy in our cities. It's very huge, and we see it in our congested roads, but we see it also that our public space gets occupied by parked cars. We all know that cars are only driving for a few hours a day. 95% of the time, cars are parked. They consume a lot of public space, on average 20 square meters per car. Take that 3 times a day that we remove our cars, and that's really big if you multiply it with the amount of cars that enters into a city and goes out. In times when urban space is very scarce, it becomes important that we will think about another way of parking and free parking instead, and turn those concrete or asphalt places into more cool, open and green spots for people, in fact. And this is what Park4SUMP is about. We try to step away from the old-fashioned way, thinking of parking only facilitating the parking of cars, of vehicles. We want to integrate the parking as a strategic tool into a very interesting tool that also is supported by the Commission, and that is the SUMP, so the Sustainable Urban Transport Planning or Mobility Planning. If we integrate parking in SUMP, it can become a real game changer, because we will try to not only think in terms of supplying parking, but we will try to facilitate the demand of car use also by addressing users and make them think of other ways of moving around. So more walking, more cycling, more use of public transport. It also infects other domains of the SUMP, like public transport. When we organize a park and ride, you have to organize public transport to get from the parking to the inner city, for instance. The other way of thinking, it must also support the broader objectives and the vision that we put in our SUMP. So it will be about climate, bringing less concrete or removing it into green spots. Will mean that we reduce heat places. I will show you some examples later on. There's also a core funding mechanism from parking available for SUMP, because when we reinvest parking money that comes from parking, we can use that for more sustainable options, like reinvesting in bicycle lanes, public transport, etc., etc. Also, parking is really a tool that is feasible for all cities, not only the big cities, they are advanced most of the time, but also small-scale cities. If you compare it to other tools like UVAR, we can say parking is one of the most cost-effective tools that is feasible for all of the cities. And we make the slogan that we use in SUMP, planning for the city, that's the slogan, we make it become reality, because we are not only planning about transport, but we are really planning with and for the people when we are dealing with this. Finally, it also paves the way to transition of urban space, frees urban space, and finally, we come to more attractive cities. This is, in fact, the mission of the Park4SUMP project. The Park4SUMP project, we were 22 partners, 16 city partners all over Europe, from the north, Trondheim, for example, to the east, Balkan country like Albania, city of Skoder, to also cities like Lisbon or Reggio Emilia in Italy. You see it on the map. Besides the 16 cities, we also involved 6 experts. The project lasted for 4 years and ended last summer. So we spent around 3.1 million of the grant. So due to COVID, not all the money was spent. You see there the main activities. I come back to that later. So just to repeat, the key ambitions of the project is in fact to uplift parking management for an operation, from an operational task, mainly focusing on the supply of parking like we used to do before, to a more strategic one, integrating it into SUMP and really making it the backbone of the SUMP, also looking forward to future challenges, like there are intermodal hubs, the urban nodes, but like there's also the question of charging and parking, and there's also maybe questions in the future like what can we do with drones and enforcement of parking, just to mention another one. We created a tool to make this happen, and this tool is called ParkPad, which stands for Parking Policy Audit. The most important thing is that with this tool, you can assess your current parking status, but you can also improve it, and you can evaluate it again, and by this all, you can make it integrated in your SUMP. This is the real aim of the ParkPad. This is one infographic showing the Park4SUMP results. At the left, you see our approach mainly focusing on the awareness raising part, but also the capacity building. We had a lot of capacity building events, trainings, etc. In the middle, you see the core of the project, which was about the pilots with the city and the implementation of new measures. We had an objective to have 50 new innovative parking measures within the project. We reached that objective 4 beyond with 88 measures. But more important is to mention that we were able to reallocate a lot of parking spaces. More than 3,200 parking spaces were reallocated only with the 16 cities within the project. If you translate that in terms of cost benefit or socio-economic benefits, then it is equal to 2.4 million worth of parking subsidies that we save per year. So this is just to mention that the project is really cost beneficial, and this is only about 16 cities and 1 year. So if you multiply it with the cities that we exploit the project to, you can imagine that it can have a huge socio-economic benefit. Finally, also transferability, spreading the results. We produce a lot of materials in Park4SUMP. We have the Park4SUMP website, but we also have a separate website of ParkPad, which stays operative after the project. We have produced a lot of brochures. I will mention 2 specifically. In the framework of the SUMP guidelines, we produced a topic guide, but we also produced a first practitioner guide on the relationship between parking and SUMP and how to integrate it. We had many professionals that we could reach with the materials. We had videos, and we had a lot of social media posts. Measures that make the difference, I don't have the time to go in depth into them, but there are 4 measures that I would briefly like to mention. The first is expanding general management. This is the most important measure which cities can address. This is about regulated, controlled parking in different forms, from parking pricing to timing, etc. This is the example of Rotterdam, but we estimate there's still a huge potential. 15 to even 20% of our cities in Europe, and it's mostly small and medium-sized cities, didn't start with controlled parking yet. So there's a big potential to start with and integrate it at the same time in your SUMP vision and objectives. A second measure that can make the difference is reinvesting the parking revenues into SUMP. Krakow here was a good example. But there's always also work to do on standards. Reducing or lowering the parking standards makes sense, or having for cars maximum standards, that is what we want. And for bikes, it can be minimum standards instead, like 1 bike parking per dwelling per pillow. And last but not least, also a measure that we tested, that we piloted, is the SUMP integration, and there's 2 good examples. One is from Vitoria-Gasteiz, to be very briefly. They removed 2,000 parking spaces at the main corridor of the city and built a tram line instead. Not only a tram line, but also green space for pedestrians, and also a bike line. And what you see with a follower city here in Belgium, the city of Sint-Niklaas, it has the biggest main square in Belgium. It was full of concrete, it was ugly, and now the plan is due to Park4SUMP that they want to turn it in a more green spot with trees, with less parking space, underground parking space also. So this is also a good example. Let's now come to the mid and long-term expected impact. We want to continue with the ParkPad tool that we developed in the project. Exploitation of this tool as a key exploitable result is very important for us, and that's why we applied also for the Horizon Booster program. We were granted for that, and we are now dealing with all the market research, etc., for the ParkPad tool. It's also endorsed by the European Parking Association, which means that they also agree that parking is not only an operational tool, but that you have to combine it with SUMP. About rollout of ParkPad, it is expected that only this year we plan to have another 40 ParkPads in mainly Flanders in Belgium, but also Baden-Württemberg in Germany, because these two governments support the ParkPad tool, and they want a real take-up of this tool in their cities. Also, there's a new Interreg program on that, but in general, there's many more challenges for the future. There's a first challenge of how to manage the curb in our cities that are growing. What about EV charging? There was a specific session this morning before this session on e-charging. I didn't notice there in this session a Norwegian city as a leading city. We had one, which is Trondheim, and I think we can learn a lot of Norway in terms of e-charging. There's also the problems with interoperability of data, or the potential of that. There's the need to take up the maximum standards, we think. There are some problems with the earmarking principle, so reinvesting the money from parking is not so easy in each city or in each country. And there's also, of course, or there remains in some cities, I can imagine, the problem of political buy-in. Parking remains very emotional, and also for politicians, they don't always want to change things on that. But to wrap up, sustainable parking, as we might use that as a new word, it can be a real game changer for resilient cities, and also in terms of connecting to the European objectives, the European programs like the Green Deal, the Cities Mission. It can be very useful on this. We have some final recommendations from the project. At one side, for cities, they should really start, if they didn't to use the ParkPad and integrate parking into sustainable urban mobility planning. They should be thinking about using maximum standards instead of maybe the minimum standards that they were used to do, because this is certainly worth doing it in areas where there's urban densification goals with new developments. Of course, the ParkPad tool, which brings the discussion on parking from an emotional level to a more rational level, and which has the advantage that it can bring not only public but also political acceptance. For the national level, there's some barriers which we have to count with, and some of the barriers, they have to deal with legislation that is counterproductive, like there's a national law that says you cannot or that says that a city cannot raise their parking prices beyond a certain level, or there's a law that still says that cities cannot use the principle of earmarking because it has to go to a national pot or a regional pot or even a general city pot and not being used for sustainable urban mobility. So just to end, if there's cities in the room or you know cities that we can help with integrating parking into SUMP, just call us and we can make a deal for a park pad exercise. We trained experienced national auditors. They know about the national regulations that will get also familiar with the situation in the cities. We created within the park pad an online survey that can be used from the platform, from the website. We will guide 2 roundtables discussion, and with park pad finally together with the auditor we will create a report, and the city will also get certificated. So they will be ready with an action plan. So this is the main outcome of the park pad. They will be ready with an action plan to integrate into their SUMP. The materials from park pad can be downloaded from our website. So there's the materials that I mentioned, but there's much more. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Patrick. I particularly noticed how you said parking can be used as a game changer in urban mobility. I think that's very interesting. And how the concrete results of this project, you said that an impressive figure, 3,200 parking spaces have been converted to other uses. Also the park pads and how this can be integrated and how parking can be integrated into the SUMP process. And also for other projects out there, also the use of the results booster. So now we'll move on to the questions and answers. So I'll be handing over to Andréia.
So first, thank you very much for all the presentations. And we usually talk about making cities more sustainable, livable, inclusive, accessible, and I would add now glamorous as well. So we can keep that in mind. So we learn a lot from these projects, and I think the 3 projects, they touch upon improving what we call the hardware, the software, but also the orgware. And as we talk about infrastructure, standards and awareness campaigns and trainings and education, but we also need to look very closely to the institutions, authorities, the new framework, policies and legislations that we need to be able to move forward with the things that we saw here. And I think another point that was particularly good as well, that it's important to reinforce, is the assessment. So cities assessing themselves, understanding where they are, their situation, not to compare and feel bad about themselves, but to actually be able to understand what is needed to move forward. And it's great to see the involvement of public, private, the engagement of authorities and in all of this. And with that being said, there are questions from the audience? Yes.
Thank you. Indeed, very nice panel. I really appreciate. I have 2 questions, one for Pascal and the other one from Samuel. You were referring to the bike economics, and indeed, indeed, I appreciated the term. I read all the documents published by Civitas and also by your consortium. I have to point out one aspect as a member of CONEBI and also sponsor of CONEBI, that in these documents you never refer to the fact that among the 22, almost 23 million bikes purchased in Europe, 80% of the frames are made in China. So when talking about economy, we also have to talk about the manufacturing of things in Europe. Okay, that's a point. And then, as a consequence, there is the question to Samuel. We also produce cargo bikes. Do you think that selling cargo bikes at 4,000–6,000 euro and above is really sustainable? Is this the way to promote cargo bikes?
Well, I think it's interesting to see what's happened in Belgium, because there's, and actually Germany and Austria too. I think an important part of cargo bike adoption, yes, they're expensive bikes. 4-6, I mean, depending on the brand as well, it goes north of 6,000 as well. So yeah, that's why I was saying that, you know, at the current price point, for someone to go out and purchase a cargo bike, you know, go out on a Saturday, go into their local bike shop and purchase a cargo bike, it's a big decision. You know, you can buy a second-hand car for that sort of money. But I think there are, well, no, we've seen in Belgium and Germany and the Netherlands, when financing policies are put in place by local governments. In Belgium, there's a mobility plan where employees can lease bicycles and use their pre-tax income to purchase a cargo bike, or any bike really, but it basically reduces the cost of a cargo bike by up to 40%. Well, again, any sort of cargo bike can reduce the cost of the bike to by up to 40%. And you know, that can also be accumulated with things like subsidies. I think at this early point in time, when the industry is scaling and maybe economies of scale in cargo bike production haven't been achieved, and price points are relatively high, these subsidies and subsidies can be useful in bringing the price down. And then, you know, mobility budgets need to be spread out more widely than in basically Brussels and parts of Germany and Austria, because we've got the statistics, we've got the figures that prove that when those budgets are put in place, people do adopt them. People do want to buy a cargo bike. They just turned off by, as you said, the high price point. But I think in time, yeah, industry will bring down the price of cargo bikes. And simultaneously, I think there will be, well, I hope there will be greater adoption of mobility budgets throughout other European cities to incentivize people to move away from car ownership and move towards other vehicles. And that, you know, same for public transport, incentivizing more use of public transport, incentivizing, you know, even you know, walking and multimodality is also essential as well to decarbonize transport more broadly. But cycling can be a fantastic way to decarbonize transport, and yeah, mobility budgets can be a really valuable way to achieve that modal shift. So, so I think it's a combination of levers that can be pulled by governments to effectively bring down the cost of owning a cargo bike.
I think you have to push that button. Yes, it works. You find me between a rock and a hard place with your question. 80% of all bicycle frames come from China, and Europe levies like 100% tax on them, while I, as a consumer, would love to not have that 100% tax on it, because then prices can go half. Now, I don't know where that money goes to, the 100% levies. Is it 100% or something like that? If that can be used to support production of bicycle frames in Europe, then I would love that. But it is not the case. The money disappears, I guess, somewhere, and maybe we should lobby for more support for the bicycle industry in Europe, because it's, we need them, and we need them fast. We cannot be depending on large transports all the way from China. where, by the way, it's not only China, but the production of bicycles, they hover between Vietnam and Thailand, and then, you know, that's where the tax brings them. And that should not happen.
Thank you. So I think the first one in the back. Me? Yes, you.
Hi there. My name's Nigel Williams. I'm the president of the European Parking Association. I have a comment and a question for Patrick. Yeah. So first of all, the comment is, it was refreshing really to hear your speech, because we go to a lot of conferences, and generally we stay in the corner because we're bad people who represent the parking sector in Europe. And I mean, SUMP, you know, the Park4SUMP was a brilliant project, because parking is one of the things that you can use as a lever for strategic thinking about mobility. And it's things that, in principle, you can put in place much faster than you can investing in, you know, more public transport, etc. So my question to you really is, you know, how can the European Parking Association help, I would say, get more implementations of SUMP, because it's not that well known by in the cities really, is what we find. And you know, we would like to work with you, because you know, we realize as an industry that, as you were saying, you know, the elephant in the room, but there are things that can be done with that elephant quite quickly to actually make things better.
Yeah. Thank you for your nice words. Indeed, we have a good cooperation with the EPA, and it, well, we established some good contacts with Theo Thuis also. He was also at our final conference, and well, the meaning, I think, is that the park bed can become really important, also being endorsed by the EPA. And maybe we should sit around the table again, just to make it a little bit more concrete. I realize that your target group is not always cities, but thinking in terms of SUMP targets and the integration of parking, I think there's a real need to also work with cities, and I think we as intermediary persons can help with that. So glad if we can sit again around the table. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. The next one? Yes.
Xavier. Hi, Guido Sacchetto from DG Research Innovation, working on zero emission transport. I have a question in particular for Samuel and Pascal on cargo bikes, because of course, as you said, it's not just a bike, it's something different. And seeing these numbers, I'm wondering, maybe it's something that I missed in the presentation. Did you consider the impact of this on the complete road transport system? And I'm not only talking about the cars, but maybe pedestrian, public transport, buses, tramway. I see it missing in this presentation. Was just wondering if it was taken into consideration in your presentation, in your project. And one additional point would be if, when, and how, or up to which extent should we regulate cargo bikes? Thanks.
Okay, let me give it a try. Yeah. Cargo bikes is one of the 60 solutions that we discussed and studied in Handshake. So go to the website and you'll find all the answers there. For me, cargo bikes it's a booming. It has been like here a little bit and people say, nah, cargo bike, nah. And now it goes all the way up. So this takes city planners by surprise. How can we not only accommodate cargo bikes, but also how do they fit in the whole mix of mobility? How does that alter inner cities? How does that, for instance, I come from Amsterdam, how can it help for canals no longer falling apart because there's these big trucks on there? One thing I never understood is if you are having some building site, then you're going to dig a garage or something underneath your house, then there is this huge container standing out there, waiting to be filled month after month after month. If you do that by cargo bike every day 200 kilos, I think that a cargo bike can handle that, then you don't block that road anymore. There is so much to be discovered in cargo bikes, regulation obviously, but it is, especially for politicians and thinkers, how does a cargo bike, and there's many types of cargo bikes, how can they replace a whole lot of stuff that you don't want in a city? Does that make any sense? He has more.
Coming to your point about regulation, I think it's an interesting point that is being looked at by the Commission, by DG Grow and DG Move, and I mean, the cargo bike sector, or, you know, industry is a growing industry. It's growing very rapidly. There's new form for cargo bikes, and there is standards underway. There's the creation of standards currently underway, so that on the industry side of things, there are some basic, obviously, standards and principles that define what a cargo bike is, and that's looking at different types of cargo bikes. There's that standards, European standards group is, as I said, sort of leading the way in terms of defining what a cargo bike is, because at the moment that is still a relatively kind of a vague concept. What's becoming clear is that there are sort of light cargo bikes and heavy cargo bikes. Light cargo bikes are basically seen for being used for personal use, and heavy cargo bikes being used for other applications, whether that's, again, deliveries, logistics, or services, or stuff like construction. I mean, there are a whole bunch of use cases that I don't think have even really been explored yet. But bringing that new type of vehicle onto the road, I suppose, does pose questions for policymakers. What is the impact of these types of bikes on the road network? And how do they fit in the road network? Do they need to use cycling infrastructure? Do they need to use roads? In a country like Belgium, where cyclists by law need to use cycle infrastructure when they're cycling, often that cycling infrastructure isn't adapted to what we would consider maybe a heavy cargo bike. I think there needs to be a rethink of how we allocate space in the road system. Obviously, that's a common point that everyone talks about, but maybe having a bit more flexibility, for example, in a country like Belgium, and I think it's also the case in Germany, opening up the road space to different vehicles, including cargo bikes, and allowing them to use cycling infrastructure when it's appropriate, and then using the road network when it's appropriate. A big, again, you know, there's safety and all those sorts of questions that crop up, and speed differential is a big factor that needs to be taken into account. If you've got cars traveling at 50, 70 kilometers per hour and cargo bikes traveling at 25 kilometers per hour, limited 25 kilometers per hour, you're talking about a speed differential of at least 25 kilometers per hour, which is, you know, more and more research coming out about speed differential, but a recent study from the Netherlands saying that that's a considerable speed differential and poses a threat to the rider of those cargo bikes, who is the vulnerable user in that situation. So yeah, I think that, again, you know, it's really an area that's developing, and yeah, I think we're following the regulation that the Commission is currently doing. Is the PMD review. I recently found out that DG Go is doing a new, is commissioned a new piece of research on how to organize the road space and how to classify or look at, you know, where these personal mobility devices fit in the road space. And so, you know, we continue to follow that, but I think, yeah, there needs to be a sort of more holistic view of how cargo bikes can fit into that road network, because the benefits for urban livability, decarbonisation of the transport system, you know, last mile logistics is all there. But yeah, I think that the regulation needs to support that, essentially.
Can I comment? I'd love to comment on this one because I have a view. You won't be surprised that I should have a view on this one. Cycle paths are called cycle paths for a reason. There's bicycles to be on them. Now, what you need to do is to reconsider the position of the car on the road. If you say it goes 50 to 70 kilometers per hour, then it just goes too fast. Amsterdam is now going back to 30 kilometers max almost everywhere. And there's two options on how to reach that. Tell them, you shall not go faster than 30, or you put everything else also on that road. Cargo bikes, electric vehicles, micromobility, all that stuff, even e-bikes. And if you only have a small cycle path, please give that to the bicycles and let the rest organize themselves and go on an average, I guess, 20 to 25 kilometers per hour. And if you are going to sort of say, we go from 70 to 60 and maybe later on to 50, then you will create accidents and you will sacrifice people. But if you all do go 30 or 25 kilometers per hour and mix them with all the modes, then there will be less accidents, traffic will go faster, will flow better, and you don't lose a lot of years and a lot of lives.
Thank you for that. Is there any more questions? Yes.
Thank you. This is Ioanna Fargadiotou with Inlecom. I have a question for Patrick. I didn't quite understand how the transforming a parking lot to a nice park, everyone likes parks, how did this solve the capacity problem? Because the vehicles that were parking there need to park somewhere. Did you transform them to an underground?
Generally spoken, often cities have an oversupply of parking. That's one. Reallocating this parking sometimes is needed. There's a point to reallocate parking from on-street to off-street. That's a good idea. But you can also reallocate parking spots from moving from the inner city, for example, to the outskirts of the city and having a connection with the city through public transport line or to bike sharing systems, etc., etc. Yeah, really, it's not only a capacity building, a capacity problem. I think if you look at occupancy rates of parking, a lot of cities they face occupancy rates that are quite low, and so that means that there's still a lot of capacity only at some peak moments. It looks like, well, I'm searching for a parking place and I don't find them. And there are other tools, there are other instruments nowadays to address people to the right parking space without creating a lot of search traffic. But what we really should consider is that we have too much public parking space. The example of the city of Reggio Emilia showed that, well, they made use of the COVID situation when there was more space needed for pedestrians and cyclists, and they really removed parking at a real central square, and they never reallocated really the space. So in terms of, yeah, it was really a reduction of car, and there was no problem. And when you get into communicating with citizens, with the neighborhoods, they finally they think it's right because the city becomes more attractive. They get a square where their children can play, where there's time in the evenings to meet people, to drink something, terraces, etc. So let's think about how can we create more livable cities instead of concrete or asphalt for parking and for roads.
Yes, I agree. I live in Athens, so parking is not that easy. So in our city, at least, I don't think that there is a lot of space to reallocate. That is why I'm asking.
Yeah, but we should use parking also to make a transition and to make people think about their modal choice. When we're talking about the Green Deal with the city's mission decarbonization, there's really a need to have less cars in our city. Also in Athens, I really think.
That is true. That is the solution. Thank you.
There's another one in the back.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with what Patrick was saying. And Athens, a city I know well, and it is absolutely clogged with cars, isn't it? But, I mean, there's one thing you perhaps didn't say that is politically pretty sensitive. But a lot of the cars in many cities are actually residents' cars sitting for free on the street, and that has to stop. It's madness. So how you deal with that, because you're talking to people, you're trying to convince people who are voting for the people that have to take that decision. But until we find a way around that, then a lot of the problems are going to remain.
So I'm just going to add something on that. I think Park4SUMP has a perfect tool for that, because if you're able to manage, it's able to show that the demand is not so big, and you can do this in different ways. So I think in the transition, having tools and resources like the one from Park4SUMP is essential, because it's not just taking a car from one place to the other, but rethinking the whole thing. But I'll stop my comment, because there's another question there.
Yeah. Good morning, Paolo Sospiro, University of Florence. Well, a lot of, let's say, questions and thoughts and so on. But frankly, I didn't understand what does it mean these tools about the park pad. It is for the municipalities in order to plan, the city, or it is for, for private and something like this. It would be nice, to see at least some, let's say, screenshot in order to see how it works and something like this. And the second aspect is, I just bring my, let's say, my ordinary life, or my family life, let's say. We don't use a lot of the car, especially in the city. That means I used to work mainly at home, or sometimes at university, but usually I walk to go to university. And the two kids, well, actually they are not kids anymore, but they use the public transportation, or they walk. And my partner actually, she uses, for 2-3 kilometers per day, 4 kilometers per day. Then we don't need, a car, usually, in the city. The problem is what we are going to do, as mentioned just previously. We need a car, to go out of the city. But we don't use this car, generally speaking, the whole day, but we should park it. And we are, let's say, a quite advanced people, let's say, if we would like to talk about it this way. That means, we are paying attention about the environment and so on, but we need a car. Of course, we can rent a car, sometimes. This is what we used to do. But we cannot rent a car, I mean, for, let's say, 2 hours, I mean, going out of the city and come back, because it takes 1 hour just for renting a car. So, I mean, this is an issue that we have to take into account, and it is very useful, I mean, this kind of project, but we have to take into account. I'm finished. I'm abusing
okay.
the time. I apologize. Regarding cargo bike and what he mentioned at the beginning, I lived 1.5 years in China. They have this culture and tradition about, I mean, electric scooters and so on. So it is an amazing, I mean, approach and an amazing, I mean, long tradition and so on. But living there, I bought, I mean, an e-scooter and so on, and one of the problems is still remain a battery. I mean, in the middle of the day, in the middle, I mean, of the road, you are stuck. So what is the point about even the e-cargo bike? It means how you manage, I mean, the problem of the battery in terms of end of life and in terms of the ordinary day. Thank you very much. I apologize.
I try to answer very quickly. First about the park, but the park bet is addressing to cities and municipalities indeed, because there's 2 reasons. One, there's the reason that parking is mainly a local competence of local authorities, and secondly also when we are talking about integrated in our SUMPs, it's also the local authorities that are the main players in our SUMPs, so they should take care of. So these are our clients, in fact, so for the park pet. The park pet consists, I showed it, out of 3 phases. In fact, there's a self-assessment based on a questionnaire that is online, covering the different topics of parking. So not only parking operations, but also enforcement, also communication and information, data gathering, etc., etc. The second thing is that based on the outcomes of the questionnaire, we will sit around the table with the different stakeholders, also including the politicians, so the decision makers. And here really comes the aspect that we want with this discussion. We are open and we try to move from an emotional discussion, which parking still often is, to a more rational discussion, just based on the questionnaires that we analyzed, and this is the basis for the conversation. Third, it's really based on consensus building. So the basis for the action plan of the park pet is consensus building. So we have to agree with the different stakeholders what are the right measures to improve our parking policies in which of the domains. And finally, it all comes into the report. So this is the third part. Second question, if I remember well, if you don't need always a car.
Quickly.
Yeah, if you don't always need a car, and I think we all agreed that car ownership is no longer always the future. Also, the automotive sector recognized this. So car sharing systems become more and more important, and maybe also for you. So, yeah. And
yeah, I'm sorry, we need to wrap it up, but I'm sure that you can all continue the discussion. Sorry, I know that Sam and Pascal wanted to say.
I only want to say one thing.
Very quickly.
Yes, very quickly.
2 seconds.
Not even. I made a law, the law of Pascal. And the law of Pascal says if you spend in a municipality €25 per inhabitant per year on cycling, in 5 years, you will have changed the city, and in 15 years, you'll have bicycle culture. So do it.
So thank you very much. Thanks again for our speakers and for the questions. And I think we have here a good set of resources that we can exchange. and hopefully they can reach other contexts and we can move with this transition to have more glamorous cities. So thank you very much.